I don't need to. I just need camera. You will be sitting here?
Yes.
You can be sitting here as well. I don't know. It's just...
Bonjour, bonjour à tout le monde. Donc, vous avez traduction anglais-français. Pour les gens qui ne comprennent pas le français, vous mettez ici et vous allez... Alors, je le précise parce qu'on m'a demandé. Normalement, c'est... Vous appuyez et vous avez le premier floor, deuxième. Ça doit être en français, vous regardez. C'est le troisième en français. Et le deuxième en anglais, c'est ça. Voilà.
Channel number 2. I am very happy to have you here at the European Parliament to discuss a topic that is very important for me personally and has been for over 20 years. Back when we first started to use smartphones and mobile phones in general, and I was a deputy at the National Assembly, and we organized the first symposium asking ourselves, are mobile phones dangerous? Because we were receiving information from the United States, from the UK, that showed that electromagnetic waves were possibly harmful. And back then, we already had experts that had conflicts with phone operators and therefore wouldn't give clear information. Then we created CREREM, the independent lab, in order to analyze in an independent and objective way the different measures concerning the electromagnetic waves. And then, as a European MEP, with my colleagues, and I'm also very happy to welcome Mr. Stuckman, representative for DG Connect, that will talk to us about the different projects of the European Commission regarding everything pertaining to smartphone development, 5G, 6G, so that you can become aware of the big technological progresses. However, there is something we are not talking about, health and safety, because it's beautiful to develop technologies, Mr. Stuckman, but it's also important when it comes to the citizens to know what the sanitary, health and environmental impact of this radiation is. And so when it comes to 5G, since the decision came from the European Commission and the different phone operators, we invested a lot of money, a lot of funds, so that we could reach a European sovereignty in order to have European patents, and so that we shouldn't depend from the Chinese or the Americans, but we didn't have an impact studies when it comes to safety. And then with the parliament, with a structure called STOA that gathers MEPs and discusses innovation, we were able to lead an independent study on the sanitary consequences of the frequencies caused by 5G. We called the Institute Ramazzini and then Italian and Belgian experts who declared that on wavelengths for whom we know the frequency, 700 megahertz, 3.6 gigahertz, studies have been conducted and proved that these frequencies have consequences on safety. When it comes to millimetric wavelengths, 26 gigahertz, there are no studies so far. So far it hasn't been used, but when we will use them, we will encounter a number of problems. Why am I saying all this? Well, my purpose is simple. When it comes to 5G, even if we develop technology, we lack a global vision when it comes to these millimetric wavelengths that we should apply, and we will hear a number of cautionary tales. I'm also very happy to have here with us electro-hypersensitive people. Because with time, we are starting to notice that this population is increasing. These people are being discriminated. They're not being recognized. And no solution is given to people who suffer from electro-hypersensitivity so that they can have a decent life. And therefore, we will hear a number of stories, of testimonies from them, because they're raising the alarm about this electromagnetic pollution. As long as we're not affected by it, maybe we do not worry about it, but now we need to worry about it because it is affecting women, men, children, young people, and it is a true and real problem that should be addressed on the European level. And it's not being addressed so far. And I'm also very happy to have Michèle Rivasi here with us because he raised the alarm as a medical doctor on the trustworthiness of our smartphones. Do our smartphones respect a number of rules that are called SAR or DAS, depending if we say it in French or in English, but a number of rules are not being respected and abided by, and we realize that a number of national agencies do not carry out the monitoring that should be carried out on a number of smartphone models. And so we will address a number of questions. And I'm also very happy to welcome some representatives that have presented resolution at the Council of Europe. We have Jean Hus and our colleague that represents the Economic and Social Council of the EU and has published a report on electromagnetic radiation, and I'm also very happy to have him here so that he can share his results. And then obviously as a EMP, we had one that came to support you, but she had another meeting. But we also have Mr. Sinchik that was always here with us when we organized events when it comes to EM waves and especially 5G. He comes from Croatia, and he will share a few information, and then my colleague Mrs. Pelletier will join us and will be the moderator for the question and answer session. So here is in a few words what I wanted to say. There is a huge amount of work that needs to be done. We need to recognize electro-hypersensitive people, and I'm very happy to have Europe for Safe Connection, this association. Where is Rock? I saw him before. Oh yeah, here. Who represent this association that comes from the Netherlands, and I will now give the floor to him because this organization that is gathering a number of member states. Oh, here Sophie just arrived. Sophie, you can join me.
Et qui, donc, votre association.
So this organization, your organization, is a sort of alliance gathering associations, experts, electro-hypersensitive people. And I think it is giving a good example of what we should be building at the European scale. So here Sophie is taking her seat, and she will be, as I said, the moderator when we will have our question. So Mr. van der Boom, I will give you the floor. So that you can present to us your alliance, your organization. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Ms. Rivasi, thank you very much for the opportunity that we have here to present the new non-governmental organizations, European for Safe Connections, an NGO that exists of a number of organizations throughout Europe, not only the EU, but also organizations outside the European Union that understand that the EMFs, as we have currently in our society, have a negative side effects in many respects, actually, not only on health, but also on nature. and digitalization that has some very unexpected side effects as well. Could you give me the next slide so people can look with me? The content of my speech, I think I have only 15 minutes, so I can only give a rough sketch of the background of our organization. I will give you a view at what we want to achieve at the participation and what we ask from the politicians to do. I thought I had a presentation actually, but I don't see it. Is that an idea? Okay. First, how it began. I will be short at that side because Brunello Trevi, who is sitting next to me, will give also a view on the ECI, and it actually derives from the European Citizens Initiative's Stop 5G, Stay Connected but Protected. We have there a number of elements like the health element, the environmental issue, and the privacy issue or human rights. We had a lot of contact with the scientists and researchers and contact with a number of corporations, Phonegate being one of these. And we also will have a short presentation today about Phonegate. Phonegate, as already mentioned by you, Mrs. Rivasi. The problems with EMFs and digitalization is on the next sheet. Actually, two sheets further down. This we already have had. So when you can give the next sheet. Yeah, the problems with EMF and digitalization. Thank you very much. The focus of our European Citizens Initiatives was at health, at the environment, and at the citizens' rights. At this slide, we have some focus at the health issue. The health issue, by the way, is not only about humans, but also about nature. And we see that there are numerous research projects that show relations with EHS, with cancer, with cell stress, with free radicals, genetic damage, fertility, learning and memory problems, neurological damage. And it is recognized by the consensus initiative from doctors in the United Kingdom. That's also supported by doctors' organizations outside the United Kingdom. Altogether supported by about 35,000 medical personnel. And they feel that the elements I just mentioned are to be considered as scientifically being proven as a result of electromagnetic radiation, non-ionizing type of radiation. So we see a lot of results, and the research article Ms. Rivasi referred to also agrees that fertility can be shown to be a proven effects of EMF, and cancer is the likely result. So we see very serious issues related to EMFs. Next slide, please. But it's not only about EMFs. When we look at the research being done by Professor Manfred Spitzer, we see problems with digitalization more in general. Children, specifically children who have long screen time, they have a one-sided development of their brain. And that's not a very small thing. And as a result of this one-sided development of their brain, they may encounter very early dementia, even decades before you could normally have dementia, which is basically an old people's syndrome. But it can happen even at ages like 40 years. And what we see with children is that they have reduced learning possibilities, attention deficits, lack of self-control, sleepiness, depression, and what is also a completely different aspect is addiction to screens. And at the left side, you see some examples of the research of Professor Torchert Noord and Mrs. Super, the German research. And you see that children who has a long screen time every day write much less well than those who have only limited screen time. And also the memory of those children are much less than those who have limited screen time. So these are very serious consequences of the digitalization, and we really have to do something about this. We have the protest in France about the pension age, and somehow all this has to be paid. And when the next generation is not capable to work, then we have a very big problem. And when I have the next page, we see in the past that authorities are extremely slow in response to new environmental issues. At the left side, you see a number of issues. The list could be much longer. And the second column is about the first scientific early warnings. The third column is the date that there finally is some effective risk reduction action. And the last column is the years of inactivity of the authorities. And as you can see, this can be built up to more than 100 years before finally something is being done about the problem. As soon as there is recognition, usually the authorities not even start to respond quickly, but even then it takes years and years and years before there is really an effective action. And I introduced the orange line about the non-ionizing radiation, the subject of today. And I had a look at the military study of the military in the US of 1980, and we had a report of our Health Council from 1975 in the Netherlands. And when you look at these research, the American study goes back to 1938 with their references, and the Dutch studies goes back to the 1960s and 1960s. And they all show the phenomena that we currently see in the recent studies, as well as an outcome of health effects of non-ionizing radiation. And no effective risk reduction action has been taken. Only the heating is taken seriously, but the so-called biological effects are not taken seriously at all, although there is a magnitude of research on the issue. Next slide. Thank you. This is what we are doing for most of these activities. Next slide. We also see there is no impact analysis done for the digital communication. The wireless communication doesn't need to do, not for 5G, not for 4G, not for 6G, no requirement at all to see any impact assessment in respect of the environment. Not in respect to mining, not in respect to the enormous energy consumption that is needed for the new wireless radiation, or wireless communication, I should say. Next slide, please. So that's why we think there is a need for a Europeans for Safe Connections, because the authorities await for full scientific proof before even the first action is being taken. There is no environmental impact assessment of wireless communication. The human rights are not taken into consideration. When I write a letter and I do it in paper, we have the letter rights, so nobody is allowed to read it. But as soon as I do it electronically, everyone can read with me. And there is no option, no realistic option to do so. And the same when we log in any instrument. Now we have some problems with the possibility that information goes to China, and we wake up a little, but we are not yet waken up when information goes into our own society and our own organizations and industry. Only with the American elections we have seen some effect of what we are doing at the time. So the objectives of the ESC, at the next slide. Protection of humans, flora and fauna. It's not only humans for the health effects of EMFs. We want education and promotion of general understanding of the effects of EMFs and digital communication. We want to support and encourage scientific research, because we think research indeed is very necessary. Daniel Fels, a scientist, has made a very interesting comparison between molecules and EMFs. And he concludes in his research that for life processes, not only molecules are needed, but a proper electromagnetic fields are as essential as the molecules. When one of these two is missing, the life process doesn't work. You need both. We know a lot about how it works with molecules. We hardly know anything about what the impact of the EMFs is in the life processes. And we want to pursue better regulation that also take into account these relations. And the next is what we think is needed for the politicians to do. First of all, we want the precaution principle. Next slide. Yes, thank you. Precaution principle to be applied, not only taking into consideration the heat effects, but also taking into consideration the biological effects. We want all life to be protected, not only humans, but also plants and animals. And we see a tremendous downfall of the number of insects, and it's really becoming a problem. And there is more than sufficient proof that these insects are being influenced by the EMF we produce so easily. And we want the ALARA principle to be applied, not a further development of mobile communication and then see how we can do it a bit less than what we actually would like it from the technical point of view. But we want things like no schools with wireless radiation, everything through wires. It's easy to be done in schools to do it without wireless communication. But we don't take care of these children. We want white zones, specifically for people who are electro-hypersensitive. We want appropriate environmental impact assessments, and we want to have the human rights included into the policies for digitalization. The next slide, please. So for organizations who are conscious of the effects of EMF, we ask them to come and join us and combine our forces. And thank you very much for your attention.
Merci, Monsieur Van der Boom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van der Boom. I'm very happy to hear that you have offered a number of guidelines that we could apply to our new text. Now I will give the floor to Mr. Michèle Rivasi with his association Phonegate. Please tell us how you created your organization, what we should do so that we can raise better awareness when it comes to our smartphone use, and how, because here we are representing wide variety of countries, and I think that we can all do something, but how can the European Commission contribute so that the different countries can contribute to the cause? Yes, good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the EMP Michèle Rivasi. That is a huge support for us, for our association Alerte Phonegate, that knows the topic quite well, has been interested in it, for a number of years, and had invited us in 2019 before the COVID pandemic to talk about it. I would also like to thank Bernie and Rob for European for Safe Connection that allowed the launch of this collaborative European campaign that I will be discussing during my presentation. You can see the slide. This initiative will reach hundreds of millions of European users and consumers that use smartphones. Next slide, please. In the month of July 2016, in France, there was a report for INSES, our health association institution, that showed that 9 out of 10 smartphones on the market, put on the market in 2015, are beyond the legal limit. And I asked to access this report, and at that moment I realized that it was very hard to access the reports. And to be short, today, thanks to a number of actions that were led since 2016, we have a database inside of which France has published more or less 1,000 reports. And so monitoring actions are being led, and this is how Phonegate started, and I will be brief in my explanation. Next slide. After that, in March 2018, we created our NGO, Alerte Phonegate, that is an international NGO first and foremost. Our role, as we're doing it today at the European Parliament, our role is to lead action in a number of countries and explain what is going on when it comes to regulations, so that we can ask for change, and that we can also show how we can reach those change, because this creates the link with what Michèle Rivasi was saying during the intro, because on the one side there are never-ending evolutions when it comes to digitalization and smartphone, and we think at Alerte Phonegate, we think that this evolution could happen in a way that could protect the health of all the users. On our association side, I think it's important to say that we have and we count on a scientific council, inside of which we have some of the leading scientific experts coming from a number of countries worldwide. So first and foremost, a smartphone is the first emitter of radiation. And this is the reason why we're being exposed to radiation. And then, quote unquote, to protect the health and safety of our users, we have created on the international scene, we have created SAR, in French DAS, the specific absorption rate that is supposed to measure the heating properties of the wavelengths to which we are exposed, and by measuring the thermal aspect, the thermic aspect, we can know whether we are protected or not. But you will understand that the specific absorption rate is not a good indicator, that does not protect human health, that was created in order to protect connectivity rather than human health. So, where did we start? First, we started measuring the phone. So we took a phone and wanted to put the phone between 15 and 25 millimeters from the sensor in order to measure SAR. So we would measure the SAR not in the real situation, but far away from the person's body. Then we used another element that is very important. Nowadays, in Europe, we measure out of 10 grams of human tissue, the equivalent of 10 grams, because we do not measure on a physical person, but on a dummy. And in the US, there is a rule created by the FCC, Federal Communication Commission, and in the US, this measurement is not made out of 10 grams of human flesh, but out of 1 gram. So you might wonder, well, what's the difference between 10 grams and 1 gram? It means that a European is 3 times less protected than an American. I'm making it very simple, but just to make you understand that this indicator is wrong, the specific absorption rate that was created a number of years ago to promote connectivity, and now, on the end game today, I gave you a few examples, a few tangible examples, because SAR is a measure. We shouldn't go over 4 watts per kilo. And so we measured at contact with the body for 10 grams of human flesh and 1 gram of human flesh, and it was made by one of the international leader, Hartfile, for a French TV show called Complément d'enquête. And so for an iPhone 8, for example, next slide, sorry. For an iPhone 8, here you have the figures.
So here you have an iPhone 8 tested at different values of grams, and then you can see at 4 grams we already have 10 grams, and you see actually there is an increase of the allowed threshold from 4 to 6 times when measured next to the skin, next to the body. And those tests have been run in France, but a few experts actually confirmed the results of these tests, and they confirmed the evolution and all the measurements. And actually, even it's one of the points we want to present also at European level, to European Commission, to really support our question and ask why we currently use this methodology in Europe based on 10 grams instead of 1 gram in the US. So actually we started with the US, knowing that in the US in 2019, thanks to a US journalist, Sam Wu, that used to work for Chicago Tribune, and actually was one of the finalists of the Pulitzer Prize, and actually he published articles proving that when we use the iPhone 7 and we put it at 2 to 6 millimeters, we switch from 2 watt per kilo to 8 watt per kilo. So in a few millimeters difference, we have this increase of 4 times the level of the of the radiation. So that's why an action has been launched against Apple and Samsung. So now the fight in court is going on in the US. And just to make it simple, actually, US organizations are really fighting on this. Brand Davis, it's one of the president of this association, which was one of the council of the consultant on the President Clinton, and actually they attacked the FCC, and as you see here, in August 2021, they actually had this FCC. It was judged and faced justice because of this. And actually, a few weeks ago, the US lawyers involved in this battle, checking who is really the one who has to decide, if the FCC or the US government. Actually, they are dealing with this. And even more important, it's what's happening in Canada. Our teams and our volunteers are there. They're working there. And they are lobbying and pushing the Canadian government to publish the result of the tests. So in September 2022, a few months ago, actually we obtained the very first collective action launched against Apple and Samsung in Canada. And this will involve 5 million users, phone users, and this might also bring a penalty of $13,000, a fine basically, per person. And then next slide. I'm actually very attentive to public health issues, and actually in our research we realized that in Switzerland there is no official authority charged with health protection, public health protection. So briefly, in France we withdrawn and asked for an update of 38 models of mobile phones. So they are not on the market anymore because of this need to be updated. And this is one of the reasons that brings us to the next topic. And the next slide. And this is a campaign we launched at European level with a shared objective with our friends of Europeans for Safe Connections. We are trying to reach out all regulators, telecommunication regulators. So we sent thousands of letters in different countries, about 15 countries. And we launched this year in 2023 a real mobilization at European level to check, to verify all the mobile phones we have on the market, on the European market. And then to conclude, the next slide. Again, the next one, please. Okay, so those are the objectives I want to present to you. So basically to carry out regular controls in several countries in Europe, make sure that each European country has open data about those texts, and then publish in the RAPEX also the fines, eventual fines against the producers, and withdraw or update all the mobile phones that do not respect this SAR and to review and make a full revision of the fast methodologies we do and we carry out for the SAR, as well as the legal framework that accompany them. In our website, on our website, you can follow all the news and updates about our actions. And so if you're interested in this, you can check everything again news from our website. Thank you.
Oui, je trouve que c'est une...
It is a very interesting initiative for us as well, because Europe is supposed to protect the consumers, and since the representative of the Commission is here, I was wondering if the Commission might maybe help us in order to draft so this document establishing a responsibility for member states to evaluate this SAR regarding the as far as mobile phones is concerned. Is there something like this? Like, is there a public body in charge of this monitoring? And are some mobile phones already withdrawn from the market because of this verification? So we would like to have some help from the Commission in launching this action. It's important to work together to push country to establish those authorities in charge of the monitoring verification of mobile phones on the market. Now we switch to a very interesting subject, the EHS. I'm very happy to have some people here, really some witness here talking about their personal experience. So we have Belgian citizens explaining us what she experienced, and I look forward to listening to you. It's very important to have you here and have the opportunity to listen to your words.
And your team for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to provide a better understanding about the world of electro-hypersensitivity, or EHS for short. I am Corielle van Vuren. I am an electro-hypersensitive myself. In a moment, you will be shown a video. It is composed to give you an impression what being afflicted with EHS really means. But first, I would like to give you some important information about EHS. EHS is a very serious condition. It is induced by fields from electricity and wireless radiation. And then we also speak of other sources like radar, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. EHS really is a somatic condition. Millions of people all over the world have arrived independently at the conclusion that wireless radiation and electricity are the causes of their health condition. When they are out in the fields, their symptoms fade away over and over again. What are the most common symptoms that apply to EHS? I quote the list given by medical doctor Monica Kraut. Severe fatigue and concentration problems, insomnia, tinnitus, dizziness, headache, migraine, hypertension, depression, itching skin, burnt skin, attention disorder, heart rate issues, joint and muscle pain, but also epileptic seizures, blood clotting disorders, leading from mild nosebleeds to severe internal bleeds and even strokes. You can see for yourself that most of these symptoms are purely somatic. Some people are more affected than others. Symptoms can be acute, severe, and debilitating. When exposed to the fields continuously, people can get very sick. These symptoms are found independently by millions of people all over the world. How likely is it that they all get it wrong? Sadly, because of problems to find safe places for living, work, or school, etc., severe EHS people often become excluded from society. No exact numbers regarding occurrence of EHS and severity are known, but a rough estimate of 5% of the population that are to a certain extent afflicted seems very reasonable. The studies that have been done on EHS are mainly provocation tests that all use the same incorrect method. They test whether people can perceive radiation, but the body has no specific organ to register radiation. These tests fail because they don't take into account the mechanisms behind the symptoms. Implicitly, in these tests, EHS people are asked whether they can tell that due to exposure, their blood pressure went up, their heart rate changes, or the pattern of brainwave changed, or whether they started to bleed internally, how many times they had a headache in the last half hour, and how can they tell if this happened because of the last exposure or of the one before? What doctor would ever do such a thing to diagnose his patients? EHS is not acknowledged. That means there is no help in whatever form. Not financially, not medically, not on the individual level, nor on the level of supporting organizations. Now I would like to show you the video. Please start the video.
Welcome to the video. You will now see some video clips with people who suffer from electro-hypersensitivity or EHS. They were once fit and healthy, but then their lives changed dramatically. My name is Michèle Rivasi, and I'm a board member of a Danish health organization called Mayday, and I'm also a representative of the NGO, Europeans for Safe Connections.
I began to have symptoms from being around wireless telecommunication. I began to have, heart palpitations. So just if someone was next to me and they received a phone call or just walked next to me, sometimes I could have changes in my circadian rhythm and I couldn't sleep at night. And it would take like 2 or 3 days to recover from just 5 seconds of exposure. And then later I began to have memory difficulties and being exhausted, fatigue from just being in vicinity of someone having mobile phones or Wi-Fi. Nowadays, it affects everything in my life.
Okay.
I don't go to work. I don't go shopping. The only place I go is here at home or in the forest.
It started in 2001 when I was 31 years old, and I couldn't sleep. Suddenly it came, my sleep went worse and worse, getting worse and worse during 2 weeks until I was completely sleepless and I didn't know why. My life it changed in the last 10 years a lot. I was a very social person. I like to be with other people. I like to go shopping, go in restaurants, go in the cinema, making holidays. I like to have guests at home. I like to go making sport in a gym. I can't do anything now. At the moment, I'm not at home.
Okay.
Because at home in Osnabrück, I can't stay. I have still good friends and they go walking with me in the nature. EHS does exist. The doctors need to know about this disease and they have to learn about it at university. Please protect the children. I think it's necessary that they learn to handle with computers in school, but why does it have to be with Wi-Fi everywhere? I don't think it's good.
The problem started about 15 years with me, and especially in computer screens, I had a problem working behind a computer screen. I had flushes in my face. I had irritable stomach, cramps in my muscles, and I had brain fog and problems with word finding. So with a computer, I had a problem, but it also moved to different apparatus like a mobile phone, and sometimes also with lamps. Certain lamps like TL bulbs were very annoying. And I had to stop my work being a pharmacist after 25 years. So no deck telephones anymore, no Wi-Fi. The electricity cables were isolated, so they didn't have any magnetic or electric fields, etc. For me, it's very important that there is a very fundamental research before the whole 5G network has been rolled out. So I'm a case, and there are otherwise different cases too, and I think there should be more clinical studies to case reports from different people.
My EHS symptoms are loss of memory, lack of concentration, muscle weakness, pain in my joints, fatigue, also headaches, strange headaches, actually. Something that bothers my hearing, loss of hearing also. I have permanent hearing loss at one side, but when I'm out of the EMS, I don't experience that so much. My house is shielded and I try to avoid it as much as I can. In this world, it's very difficult to avoid it at this moment. I stay at home because my both children have EHS also, and they cannot go to school. They cannot participate. They have to stay inside. I really think that this is something that can hit everybody. That it's regardless of age, of profession, of the state of health, really. You can be in very good health maybe and just decay in a short time. I really don't, I wouldn't desire this for my worst enemy, but I think that you and your relatives can also be hit by this. I really hope that you see that we're not a couple of strange people who just got this at one moment, but that everybody can experience this, and it's a very harmful experience. And I really hope you would save yourself from this problem. I just wish for a world where my children can go outside, play with friends, make new friends, do their jobs, and not be such a patient, such a worry, because it's not their problem.
So it's not their problem. These children should have a normal life. EHS people are excluded from society because they have to live in a runaway society that wants more and more connectivity. Should efficiency, comfort, and fun be allowed to come at the expense of others, without regard for their health and without their consent? We have been asking attention for this issue for more than 20 years. I hope you start listening. EHS people have a right to live too. What is happening is an unacceptable violation of human rights. And it is not worthy of a true democracy. We need you, MEPs, to fight for us. We urgently need DG Connect to recognize that already in the current situation, the living conditions for electrosensitive people are particularly difficult. The plans regarding 5G and 6G are not acceptable without an adequate response to the problems of EHS. Society has to become accessible again to the EHS people. What is the Commission going to do? We are ready for a meeting, so we can have a good discussion on the subject. And I end with stressing my wish that other EHS people could be here as well in a radiation-free environment.
Merci de ces...
Thank you very much for your testimony. Actually, we can feel your suffering, so the isolation, anxiety, and then the recognition you're asking, because there is a problem there with the recognition. Because you are there, you exist, but the society does not recognize you. Because the better we understand how it works, and that's important to understand why everyone might become hypersensitive, the easiest will be to find a solution. And it's important also to reduce the pollution, the electromagnetic pollution, because taking drugs, taking medicines, a lot of them, it's not the solution. So now I would like to give you the floor to Marie-Noëlle Bollinger. So, a baker. So, she is actually a project manager of an association called Zone Blanche, so white zones. So can you please present us with your association? So briefly, our association that gathers from 150 to 300 members. Regarding our organization, we have a board of directors like any other association, and also we have a scientific committee and health professionals and doctors that work with us on this subject and who also help people also in terms of knowledge about their conditions. What we wanted to share with you today regarding what we have just heard, actually we received some questions that align with what we listened today.
Every day I receive emails of people asking me where are the white areas in France, where should I go, where are the welcome center, because one of the goals of my association is to create places where people could live or welcome people, places that will be protected by these electromagnetic fields. But these areas need to be found. In France now we have a directive called Nodil Mobile that requires that everyone is allowed to have a phone in order to stay connected with everyone else, and therefore we have a lack of white areas, and the less white areas we have, the more people are in a situation of difficulty. electrohypersensitivity is a very difficult condition to have. When people suffer from it, it takes usually 1 to 2 years to understand that they're suffering from it. Then these people lose their jobs, and in some relationships, usually the husband, for example, the husband doesn't understand what is going on, and so you're losing your life balance and you're losing your relationship. I can only let you imagine what it can happen inside of a family. Therefore, it's a loss of revenue when you are when you suffer from EHS and you live in town. You have to move out. You need to find a place where you can live. And then we have many people that have to move to the suburbs or to the countryside, and we are confronted with people that move 1, 2, 3 times because electromagnetic fields are becoming wider and wider, and then they move, and then the electromagnetic fields reach them once again, and then they have to move again. So they lose their life balance, they lose their social life, and they end up in survival mode. The association Zone Blanche has communicated the life urgency of people that are in very dire cases. We have people that live in mobile homes under tents, that are trying to find very remote areas so that they can find a refuge and try to barely survive. This is unacceptable. In France, ANSES has analyzed and has shown that 5% of the French population is affected by EHS. This equates to 3.6 million people. This is to give you an idea of what it could be at the European scale. Therefore, taking action is urgent. We need to integrate the fact that we have our own EHS refugees in France and in Europe. We have talked about it enough. We have heard testimonies today. It is therefore urgent and important that when it comes to the European policies, we realize and we take action for these people so that we can protect them. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Merci Marie-Noëlle. Alors en tout
Thank you very much, Marie-Noëlle. To be very transparent, I wanted to say that I used to be president of this association, and we created it in 2014 in order to answer to this demand. On the human point of view, I was really stricken by people affected by EHS. But for me, it's like non-intervention to person in danger, because these people cannot find a place to live. And when we hear the government calling us and telling us there is a person just walking in the forest, usually women, a person walking with no goal or no destination in the forest, what can we do? We need to find a place for people suffering from EHS so that we can create what we call refuge. And there are different levels when it comes to people affected by EHS. There are people that are strongly affected, that have very strong symptoms, that need to live in caves almost in the middle of nowhere. This is unacceptable. And then we also have people that, for example, if they are in a safe space during the night, they can still survive during the day, still maintaining some level of social life. But I think that these people are not represented, are not being heard, are not being protected. And these white areas are very difficult to find, because nowadays our society relies on the fact that everyone needs to be connected. And so, well, the problem persists. Now I will leave the floor to David Steinmetz, that has created an association called Ma vie en mode avion, my life on airplane mode. So Mr. Suckman put his phone on airplane mode. So thank you very much for your cooperation. Thank you for this transition. I will be brief. We've had our introduction. My name is David Steinman. I am an engineer. I'm 29. I work in the topic of circular economy, notably when it comes to the European Union. I suffer from EHS. I have been suffering from it for 4 years. In the beginning, I thought it was a simple case of burnout, but after a number of years, I realized that when I was away from any Wi-Fi source, my symptoms would disappear. So it's very surprising, and I truly didn't know that studies about this topic existed, and so I had sleeping disorders, and it was a general number of symptoms, and back then I didn't know that it would become as degrading as it is, because I didn't know anything about EHS. We need to know that EHS today can be detected through blood sampling. Since 2020, the study led by Paul Ribalet showed that there are some blood signals that can show people suffering from EHS. This is a disorder that evolves with time. In the beginning, symptoms can be very light, and then over time, the symptoms become more severe, up to a moment where, like Guy, thank you so much for being here, symptoms can evolve up to when it is impossible to be in a room without protecting with some wavelength proof fabric. So, as I said, I'm an engineer, and I came with a question about the economy side of things. We always need to find a balance between the economy, not only when it comes to 5G or 6G in every single sector, but we need to find a balance between the hidden costs for the collectivity. For example, let's take a very clear example, cigarettes. We have taxes on the selling of every single pack of cigarettes, but it does not allow this added cost cannot cover the cost, the sanitary costs for people who die from cancer because of smoking. We can talk about a number of polluters and this balance, but then we could ask ourselves, when it comes to electromagnetic radiation, do we really identify, can we realize what the hidden costs are? Has the European Commission monitored and evaluated what the costs would look like in the following 5 or 10 years? Well, the answer is no. I will not spoil anything, but the answer is no. In France, for example, 5% of the population is affected by EHS, but with the evolution of connectivity, 5G, soon 6G, this will affect an increasingly high number of people. It's therefore important to understand that out of this 5%, probably in the 5 or 10 following years, maybe 1/10 of this 5% might develop very debilitating symptoms. I mean debilitating like having to have a wavelength proofed fabric in order to stay in society. And it is important to realize that for the society, 20% of everything that we spend or that we're paid goes back to the state and the government. And I think that out of this 20%, we could invest some of it in research, and therefore people who suffer from EHS are quote unquote represent a cost for society, but this cost is necessary, and we reach 13 million euros per year. I haven't taken into consideration in this calculation cancer or early onset Alzheimer's or cost, so for example, adaptation of some tools, having to move a number of times. But just for the collectivity, I'm not even talking about the public, the private sector, apologies, a number hundreds of thousands of euros per year when the European Union invests 9 million euros to promote the development of 5G and 6G? Are we really aware of the hidden costs that are behind that, of the launch of 6G? Because after that, we will have hidden costs for our population when it comes to health and well-being. I'm not even talking about environment protection at this point. So it is important to identify the hidden costs of these evolutions in order to protect people suffering from EHS so that we can go forward in the right way. Thank you.
Merci David. Alors,
Thank you very much, David. In this first part, our last speaker, Perny Shriver, coming from Denmark, biologist, that has launched a European Citizen Initiative, an ECI, Stop 5G. The title is Staying Connected but Protected. And I think that we wanted to talk about this ECI because we are now at the end of February, and it is urgent that people can express themselves and vote so that we can push in the right direction. Of course, the rest will be in the hands of the Commission, but now the floor is yours to explain this petition, Stop 5G. Thank you.
Is this one? Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you for the invitation, Michèle Rivasi, and your great team. And thank you for all listening to this workshop. It's very important. My name is Pernille Schriver. I'm from Denmark. I'm an educated biologist and a science teacher. My background for working with this subject of health effect from wireless radiation is that 11 years ago, I discovered I was affected by radiation from wireless technology, and then I joined the Danish EHS Association. I'm also the coordinator of the European Citizens Initiative called Stop 5G, Stay Connected but Protected. Next slide, please. EHS people have spent many years, some for 10, 20 years, trying to make politicians understand that we have a real problem with the radiation level. We have contacted local politicians, national politicians, authorities, media. We have arranged demonstrations, created petitions. We have arranged 5G conferences and worked closely together with a Danish lawyer who wrote the legal opinion on 5G, which concludes that 5G rollout violates human rights and environmental laws. That is a strong conclusion. Competent scientists have written appeals, for example, the EMF scientist appeal, and the EU 5G appeal, which actually has been submitted to the EU for 7 times now, but still nothing has happened. Therefore, we have been forced to acknowledge the fact that if there is to be a change in the laws in the area of wireless radiation, we must come together on a European level in order to have the power to influence the EU laws and in this way also our national laws. Next slide, please. Authorities and politicians have really failed to protect all living beings by closing their eyes for this issue. The most crucial issue in this area is the lack of health and environmental assessment, not only on the 5G rollout, but all the wireless technologies, 2G, 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and so on. All human beings, especially our kids, are vulnerable. Animals, plants, and nature are suffering too. As you can see with this tree in the picture, which is irradiated by the mast in the background. I don't know if you can see it, but there is a mast in the background. And it's not doing too good. Next slide, please. Beside the radiation issue, there are all kinds of very serious environmental impacts. I will just mention shortly, because I don't have that much time, but you can read more on our webpage. We have the mining destruction of natural habitats, we have the conflict minerals, we have the energy consumption that is rising, and we have electronic waste rising as also, and all kinds of pollution. So it is very important that the environmental footprint of the digital rollout will be reduced. Next slide, please. It has not been easy to work with such a controversial topic. We know in large segments of the population, 5G is a positive part of their lives. Politicians are supportive through policies and financial funding. Industry with large amount of investments, and media which hardly ever mention the dark side of the wireless technology. It is as if large part of the society are wearing blinders, do not want to see, do not want to hear, and do not want to talk about the dark side of the digital rollout, which is on speed. It has also been quite difficult to spread the word about 5G on our ECI because of censorship that we have experienced. We have been excluded from Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and specific fundraising platforms. Our freedom of speech has been suppressed. Our ads and press releases have not been accepted by mainstream media, and we have not been able freely to explain our ECI to the European people. Next slide, please. Despite all the challenges, we have had several successes with our Stop 5G ECI. We have had the EU-wide collaboration with Phonegate, where we have worked together with Mark Rivasi, sending letters with questions to responsible authorities about radiation levels from mobile phones and other wireless devices. Worldwide, we have been greatly supported by, especially from the states, Safe Tech International and Children's Health Defense. And amazingly, people from all around the world have asked us if they could sign the ECI, but we had to tell them it was only for the EU citizens, unfortunately. We have been very busy creating public awareness, especially on social media. And you can see on the slide here one of the example of one of the many posters that we have produced. We have also facilitated a creation of a scientific group which have written a very important critic of the Sheer Opinion report that came out last year about the latest scientific evidence available regarding radio frequency. And I'll tell a little bit more about it on the next slide. And of course, we have managed to launch a very important NGO, the Europeans for Safe Connection, as Rob presented before. The scientific networking, we have managed to connect a group of Danish and Swedish competent people who have written a scientific report called Critique of Sheer Opinion Report on Health Risks from Radio Frequency Radiation, which criticizes the Sheer Opinion Report, the EU Sheer Opinion Report that came out in 2022. And I'll just mention 3 important points from the conclusions of this critical report. The EU Sheer Opinion Report has predetermined outcome favoring industry interest by the selection of pro-industry experts. The Sheer Opinion Report recommends adoption of ICNIRP 2020 dangerous limits that put entire EU population at serious risks. And the Sheer Opinion Report excludes the majority of field experts who agree the public must be better protected. Next slide, please. I have 3 grandchildren. On the picture is my granddaughter, Luna, watching a butterfly in amazement. I'm here today to make a better future for all of my grandchildren and for the generations to come, so they also can experience the wonders of nature. Therefore, we ask the EU to apply our 23 proposals to protect all living beings, where we have 10 proposals. To protect our environment, where we have 8 proposals. And to protect our privacy, security, and freedom, where we have 5 proposals. We have supplied legal and scientific arguments for all 23 proposals, and also exact suggestions how the EU can improve their programs, their directives, their plans, and their policies for the better. We describe precisely where the EU have competence according to all the EU treaties. And we have submitted an annex of 80 pages with the full content to the EU Commission. Next slide, please. As a final statement, I would like to send these 3 messages. The EU has failed to protect its citizens and nature against the dark side of digital rollout. The Stop 5G ECI has succeeded in many ways, and please apply the 23 proposals from the Stop 5G ECI in the EU law. And I will quote from a recent study. The European Union prioritizes economics over health in the rollout of radio frequency technologies. Thank you for listening.
Alors, je vais prendre la suite et remercier.
I will take the floor to thank Michèle and the team. I would like to thank all the speakers. We can hear from the different testimonies that we can really understand the degree of suffering that they are experiencing. Unfortunately, we do not have as much time as expected, so we will allocate 15 minutes for question and answers. I know that a number of questions were asked already were addressed to the Commission, but if someone wants to take the floor.
Colleagues, I will just make a few statements, and I will also make some at the end. So before coming here to European Parliament, I was a member of Croatian Parliament, and I was also chair of the Committee for Environment Protection in Croatian Parliament. Also, I made a seminar in, I think it was April 2019, and we brought representatives of scientists on this event. One of them was Dr. Olle Johansson from Karolinska Institute from Sweden. I think he just retired in that year or so. This is a person who most of his life made experiments of how electromagnetic waves influence not dummies, not plastic dolls or pieces of metal, but real human biological tissues. And it is really a tragedy that most of the regulatory bodies and scientists ignore everything but the thermal effect. How much will a piece of metal or a piece of skin increase in temperature after some limit of exposure? But what about biological effects? What about long-term effects? So Mr. Johansson made a statement on that event that the cumulative effect, not in 5 minutes, but over 20, 30 years, exposure to this radiation could have dire consequences. So this is something that is being completely ignored by most regulatory bodies. And he's not the only one. There are hundreds of scientists who even made some petitions to emphasize such dangers, but so far they are being ignored. Wherever I could, I mentioned this line, I mentioned this argument. I'm basically an electrical engineer, but I speak now as a politician as well. In biology, you have those chains of amino acids, the proteins. And if they are charged in one way, they have a certain shape. But if they are charged in another way, for example, by electromagnetic wave, then they change their shape. And this influences a wide range of cellular processes. So it is quite a complex field, and we should put much more attention on that than we put now. For now, thank you.
Merci, merci.
Thank you very much for this intervention. Would the representative from the Commission would like to answer of the questions that were asked to you? Maybe David would like to start, or I don't know. Yes, I think there were a number of questions. First of all, thank you for the possibility to be here. I am very honored to be here, and I was also very stricken by different testimonies, very touched by it. First of all, I need to say that the representative for DG Health were invited, but unfortunately they couldn't come, so I can talk about a number of topics, but for a number of other topics, I am unfortunately not an expert, so I cannot address those questions, but it doesn't mean that we cannot address every type of question here. Maybe I will have time to, in the second part, to present our 6G program in the second part, if I'm not mistaken. Here we're surrounded by a number of experts. A number of limitations are being put into question that are based on our current results. A number of efforts are being put into science in order to better ourselves, because we need a wider set of data. Because if we have more data, we can have more intelligence. In the context of this program, we have a project funding research on EMF. This is important, should be highlighted. And then there was this remark on the committee. So we are currently reviewing our limitations. It is an ongoing revision. There was a first opinion that was not published after a consultation. These comments are obviously being taken into consideration, and then I think there will be a second opinion by the half of this year, half of 2023, if I'm not mistaken, where we will talk about new frequencies that have been addressed previously. The milli-meta waves. So what helps is that they are short distant waves. So when we have ideas on 6Gs, there are always the opportunities of technology that say if we have huge and tall transmission towers, it is less beneficial for people suffering from EHS, rather than if we had antennas on shorter lengths, or maybe the possibility of having more wide areas, or areas upon which we have full power and range of action. I thought that the cost-benefit point was very interesting, the point that Mr. Steinmetz made. Of course, we are concerned about the health costs that are in a link with 5G, 6G. These assessments need to be made, but we also heard a number of arguments about energy efficiency, energy consumption, and in this context, we wonder, indeed, we have this challenge of the green transition, where we clearly need the help of technology in order to achieve it. And so what is the potential of digital technologies in order to advance this green transition agenda? But at the same time, we need to do our homework, if you allow me the expression, so that we can really identify what our consumption in the sector are, and make more effort in order to create technologies and devices and networks that use less energy while being still optimal. So this would be the first round of answers, but if there are more questions, please go ahead. Yeah, maybe I only have a remark after what you said, because there are a number of things that are quite concerning. We talk increasingly about artificial intelligence. You said the more data we have, the more intelligence we have. Well, I do not completely agree, because I think that intelligence needs to be collective. It's not because we have personal, private data that we have more intelligence, but this is a personal opinion, I think. We can clearly see it, these networks that are being created everywhere. In my region in France, Jura, these networks do not exist everywhere. There are some white areas still, but the difficulty lies in the fact of understanding where the European Commission could act in order to find a balance, to find a safe space for people who need to be protected, and how we can find balance between these people and people who do not need protection. How can we create a safe space so that people live in a community, no longer isolated, so that people can safely go out of their home. For example, during the COVID pandemic, every child at school age needed to be in front of a screen in order to continue and pursue their education, so that in order to see progress, I think Rabelais said progress without conscience is like a heartless progress. So yes, we need to achieve progress in order to benefit humanity. We need to take the human factor into consideration, because this is not about phone operators, it's about a whole market. So how can the European Commission have an impact on phone operators that want to install antennas everywhere? I'm so sorry I took the floor, but if someone wants to ask a question, please go ahead.
Par internet.
We have a question from internet online. Actually, there are 100 people following the live discussion, and we received a few questions in the chat. And among those questions, we have one question regarding the debates. How, and this is for Pernille Shiver, regarding your initiative. How can you explain within this citizens' initiative, with all the signatures you get, that Romania, for example, only had 1,500 signatures during the first month of the petition, and the rest, actually the 500 additional signatures, are on over the 10 months that are left, taking into account that other petitions have collected 34,000 signatures. So how can you explain this gap? So maybe there is a bug in the system that collects signatures for your initiative.
Yeah, sorry, that's a very good question, and we have been asking that ourselves. So what we, one of the issues about the ECI and the signature collective system is that we have experienced that many people that are aware of the dangers from 5G is also aware of the privacy issue, the data collection issue. And when you go to the signature collection page, you have to give up many personal data. And we have received feedback from people that will not do that. So that is one of the issues.
Oui, je m'appelle Charles Six.
My name is Charles Six, and I'm from a citizen initiative that actually wants to to reduce the pollution in Brussels and wants to oppose to the implementation of 5G in Brussels. So we don't want the waves to increase. I have a very simple question for Ms. Rivasi in this fight against the SAR rules. So there are plenty of operators that do not respect those rules, so there is a lack of trust. How can we trust those people, and how the Commission works to develop technology, the 5G technology that's based on this lack of trust? How can you develop all this? So I can answer the two questions. First, as far as the risks and the negative effects are concerned, actually we have a few examples for this in the Safe Internet Initiative and Better Internet for Kids. So those that we put in place implement some mechanism to protect the children, and the colleagues in Luxembourg, DG Connect, they take care of it. And so we have also the artificial intelligence and the ethical side. So we evaluate the risks that accompany the development of the artificial intelligence. So actually Europeans are the first that are really analyzing those effects of the artificial intelligence. I have colleagues at the Parliament who are discussing about this. And so we have the high risk, medium risk, and low risk applications. And so we try to evaluate how to deal with all this. Of course, we do not include all risks, but there are some examples there. And then regarding the other question, regarding the rules, abiding the rules, actually we launched that initiative a few years ago during COVID, together with different regulators, on how to improve this trust issue, how to work on this trust issue and to fix it. And something that proved to be effective is transparency. Actually, in Belgium, there is the opportunity to measure the level of radiation in the place where you live. If I'm not wrong, it works like this. And in other countries, also you can check on maps. So you can check region by region how the situation is, to see if actually the levels are respected or not. So it would be interesting also to get more information about it, but we think that transparency is key here. And so to check if the rules are respected, this is very important. And then enforcement is also very important. So regulators are there to check, to monitor, to make sure that regulations and rules are respected. If it's not the case, of course, if we have complaints, we can address the member state concerned and ask questions, and also to somehow work with the regulators and with countries. Thank you very much. But, Dr. Rivasi, I just wanted to say that France in September 2020 actually officially opposed the European Commission action asking for a direct measurement of the SAR when the device is in direct contact with the skin. So actually we asked for this evolution to an update of the measurement methodology, and this dates back to 2.5 years now. And according to my information, no modification has ever taken place. Now, unfortunately, I cannot answer this question because I'm not an expert in the field, but I can take note of your question and get information and get back to you on this. Regarding the SAR, actually, we saw the images of people talking at the phone, actually putting the telephone next to the ear, but this is less and less frequent. Actually, it's important to have the device not really so close to the body, or it's important to keep some distance. And my answer is the problem is not only talking at the phone and putting it next to the ear, because actually the problem is also keeping the phone in the pocket, for example, because sometimes some people they never really leave the phone. They keep the phone always and constantly with them, even in the toilet. And we actually also mentioned the workers, the employees. Some of them are obliged to carry the phone every time with them. So the problem is that some people, even children sometimes, keep the phone next to them all day long. So my suggestion is not to use it and keep it next to the ear or carrying it in the pocket. So I would like to give everyone the opportunity to take the floor if they want. And I give the floor to Mr. Hus. I was invited to share with you some comments on the resolution that I submitted to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg during the Parliamentary Assembly in 2011. I cannot, of course, make a summary of it because we don't have enough time, but I would like to highlight what it's written there. Actually, I can confirm that no positive change has been made for the health of people, for nature, and for animals, for domestic animals, or for bees, for all those who are exposed and more exposed. And these make the situation even worse. So if operators and commission keep ignoring all this and being blind to all this, I can see troubles for us in the future. Even now, we have a new study regarding the 5G or 4G plus, because what we have, it's the 4G plus with new frequencies that reaching 3.6, 3.7 gigahertz. And this has been mentioned, the first study that had been made and that have been published in papers like Psycho or Physiology in 2021. And this study clearly shows two things. So analysis on people have been carried out, people exposed and non-exposed, and those analysis, those studies prove some changes in the brain activity of those people, and the brain scan actually showed a change in the activity after 30 minutes exposure. I can show you this picture. This is before the 5G implementation. So it was an iPhone 12. This is the test on people after 30 minutes exposure. You can see here the difference. You see at the bottom you can see the changes in the brain activity that it has been made through high intensity brain scan. So during this experience we actually realize an activation of the beta ega waves and the reduction the theta and alpha waves. What does it mean? This means that there are some changes at the physiological level of the brain, and at the same time the same people have been tested through some urine analysis, urine tests after 1 year, 1 hour, 1.5 hours, after 2-3 hours. You can see the result here in this table. In this test, we saw that an increase of some biomarkers that may cause inflammation. And we saw that interleukin A beta, that plays a very important role in inflammation, increased massively, and we also saw an increase of another cytokine, pure necrosis factor alpha. And during those tests, those levels have been measured, and we saw this huge change. This means that the interleukin beta has been activated at brain level, so causing some endocrine stress. So there was a silent inflammation. This triggered a silent inflammation in the brain. This of course causes a lot of problems in the brain, like also depression and others. And we also think this might play a role in the Alzheimer, or can trigger Alzheimer issues. And those are very important and scary results. And this also will be transformed in a medium and long study, because we actually saw this in short tests on a few hours, but we might wonder what happens on a longer term. So it's important that European institutions apply the precautionary principle that is enshrined in the EU treaties, and this has not been done at all. So as former deputy, I'm retired now, I'm still active in Luxembourg and still fighting on this. I have an association called Acute that deals with all those problems in Luxembourg, also heavy metals and other issues. And we also work with a National Patients Association in Luxembourg, dealing with all kinds of problems related to sick people. During my life, I can tell you, I was really pro-European. I've been always pro-European. I was the first member of the Green Party in Luxembourg in 1984, and I stayed in the Green Party till 2011, until I draft this report on health. And so I can tell you that everything that I have experienced in the last years with the European Commission, not only I'm not so enthusiastic anymore, but I can be very clear and straightforward. For me, the current Europe, its the direction is the European Commission and the member states. It's just an institution taking into account the financial economic interests, and the rest is just talking, just debate. We talk a lot, but we never take action. So I fought for so many other issues and problems, like the problems with the heavy metals and other problems. And problems are never solved because there is a problem between the DG Health and Committee of Experts, but those experts are not neutral. Basically, are people who have interests that sit there in those commissions. Excellent researchers and doctors also applied to be part of this commission, but their applications were refused because they used to ask and question a lot of principles and ideas. And my last remark is about the World Health Organization that made and still carries out some researches, but they're not really scientific people, not professional, they're just representative of the industries. And that's the reality. And that's the reason why I'm really disappointed in this Europe. And I can tell you that in Luxembourg, a lot of people are pro-European. We had President of the European Commission, like Jacques Santer or Mr. Juncker, that I personally met. But I have to tell you that my enthusiasm dropped dramatically.
Merci, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hoos, for your honesty. You've been very, very clear. You have made yourself very, very clear. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Forner. Unfortunately, since we don't have much time at our disposal, I have to ask you to be short, to keep it short. I'm sorry.
Because we know each other. We discussed already with Madame Rivasi and the colleagues in the room. We had the opportunity to discuss in Germany about this concern. I am here because I was rapporteur for ESCC opinion on the societal and ecological impact on the 5G ecosystem, and we have a slide, but it's not necessary. If it's possible, okay. And another opinion, digital identity, data sovereignty, and the path to just digital transitions. All this, next slide, please. All this has been done because we received many requests from our countries, being from Stop 5G Association, but also from trade union organization, and many of them were related with quality of life. Next slide, please. Many people has been exposed to this information about the impact of the 5G technologies. Some of them been realistic, others have been, presented as the citizens they perceived, and we heard some testimony today. We have the controversy on this subject, but I think any problem which is presented by the citizens to the European institutions has to be taken into account. And through this dialectics, we can improve the situation for this sector. We had the same situation with the mining sector. I am coming from a country where the mining sector, gold mining industry, has been involved with the use of cyanide, asbestos, and other materials. Next slide, please. So in this context, we thought that we have to do these opinions, and we have to understand, first of all, why we need this electronic communication technology and for what are necessary. And you see here from the industry for what are necessary. And the 5G is necessary for autonomous driving, is necessary for augmented reality, virtual reality, tactile internet. So in a way, are, of course, citizen-related application, but more and more are industrial application. So immediately many colleagues said, why we don't have a special architecture for the industrial application and to leave citizens, to protect citizens somehow throughout the architecture of the network. This debate in our countries, in Romania, for example, we have a colleague here online, Madalina Apostol, participated in ANCOM, which is a regulator in Romania. This debate has been very vivid in our country, where we have to apply this technology, not necessary everywhere. This was one of the points. Next slide, please. Of course, it's this issue, how it's formed, the signal, and we will not enter in the technicalities and the stroboscopic effect of this new technology, which is not very much studied and is not explained to the people, because we are not all technicians. I am engineer, mechanical engineer from Polytechnical Institute, but I have also law. But our other colleagues and organizations, they need these explanations, and they feel that the authority are not coping with these changes. And sometimes when we ask the people from institutions, they don't know to explain to the people what is about in this technology. Next slide, please. we have these reports from 75. The people are reading this kind of reports. And this was for the Eastern Europe. We don't know how actual it is from the Commission and other experts. They said that it's no actuality because the things changed and you have no proof. We discussed with the World Health Organization. Everybody said that we have no enough proof in order to say that it's a real danger. But the citizens continue to suffer. They have their concerns, and we have to go forward with the debate. Next slide, please. Regarding the Havana effect and non-lethal weapons, we know that they are existing, they are possible, and the citizens are also concerned about this aspect because many times they heard that the electromagnetic wave doesn't have any impact on health or on human, but we know that weaponize these systems, they can have an impact, and from this perspective, somebody has to give, reasonable explanation. Next slide, please. Next slides. We will not insist. I think I will not have time to explain all of these slides because the time is very short. But I just want to tell you that from all our opinion, the main question, cornerstone of the discussion has arrived to this electromagnetic hypersensibility. We have this discussion in Germany because, in our opinion, we said that EH has its disease, this illness. We said it's an illness, and that started a controversy around the terms. In our opinion, was a member from Spain, from Consumer Protection. They said that we have decision in the court, and this decision in the court has to be recognized somehow, and they should reflect it in a legal text. From the discussions that we have in the STOA here, we had in the STOA, and what has been said from the Council of Europe, resulted that we have a problem. It's an illness, a disorder, a disease, whatever it is, somebody should discuss this interdisciplinary environment, and maybe this is the start for the right, beginning in this regard to improve our standards and to ensure somehow a level of protection what is requested by the citizens which are presented this in the room. Thank you very much. I will close here.
Merci, Monsieur Phonegate. Merci beaucoup et merci pour votre.
Thank you very much for your very short but very effective explanation. Mr. Stockman, we give you the floor for the final intervention in order to have an overview of the Commission's position and the situation before 2030.
If you allow me, I will switch to English because I think it will be preferable for a number of colleagues, and there are a number of technical terms in the slides in English, so it might be better.
Show you a bit what is now in terms of research program. So it's not at that stage, as some colleagues here said, that we are already looking at the deployment of 6G. So we are here in a global context where all leading regions or all researchers basically in that field are now starting to do research on 6G, and we're also funding this research in Europe. So we can move to the next slide. So indeed, you asked me also to say a bit over the digital decade. So here are things probably that many of you won't like so much, especially if it's so simplified here. But of course, skills, probably no one against. We need to, if we say digital is development, economic development, societal development, it's important that we have the skills and also maybe to address some risks, that we understand how to use digital technologies. But of course, important for basic skills, but also for specialized skills. Infrastructures, here, when we say 5G everywhere, is a bit like what we have in 4G, that we say we want where it makes sense, where people want to use it, basically. So that's continuous in 5G. And also, of course, in the fixed networks with fiber, have gigabit for everyone and have fiber connections for everyone for the fixed networks. Then, of course, this is not the only infrastructure. We're also talking about microelectronics, where we have to advance. We have to look at data infrastructures to enable these services that Monsieur Phonegate just showed us, that are also, of course, useful for society, for safety, for greening sectors, and for what citizens also want to use to participate in this society. And then, of course, the usage to bringing these technologies to the public sector, but also to the business, there, have positive impacts and also to be more productive. I don't, of course, deny that there are also economic considerations there behind, that we can have more jobs and more growth. Good. That's a bit the framework, the digital strategy, digital decade that has been adopted like a bit more than a year ago. So we can move to the next slide. Yes. So why now start work on 6G? We have launched this partnership called Smart Networks and Services. So it's not only mobile, it's also fixed networks. Everything is covered. You can have these different dimensions. Of course, Mr. Haas just said we all see everything economic. I don't neglect that it's an important aspect. We see here the applications. The first on the top left, of course, looking what economic activity we could enable with these kind of infrastructures. That certainly plays a role. We also have the important point of industrial positioning. So we also maybe to say something positive that you also might consider is that we, if we do it, we talked about the ethical AI, artificial intelligence approach, that we also, if we leave it to the Chinese or maybe the Americans, maybe